Let's do it, guys.
Okay.
So, in this parsha, the main story in this week's parsha is the story of the spies. Moshe Rabeinu sent the spies to Eretz Yisroel. They came back. They told them how powerful the nation was, and then they offered analysis, commentary. And they said, and because they're so strong, we won't be able to conquer it. And that was the problem. They weren't supposed to offer any analysis. If you know, in intelligence agencies, there's two separate departments. There's the agents, the spies, the people that collect information, and then there's the people back home that their job is to analyze. The spies' job that Moshe Rabeinu sent was only to bring back the information. They weren't supposed to offer an opinion whether it would be possible to conquer or not, because Hashem told them that they'd be able to conquer. And that's how they messed up. But either way, we need to understand the general idea of why Hashem sent them, and what were they thinking when the Meraglim, when the spies came about and said such things like, Hashem cannot do this for us. What was going on in their mind? The Rebbe says that when a parsha is called by a certain name, that is the meaning and that is the content that embodies the entire parsha, even those parts that are not explicitly connected with that name. It also applies in our Sedra called Shlach, send. In this name, Shalach, everything is expressed, even other things that have no connection with it, like it speaks about the mitzvah of tzitzis in our parsha. It speaks about the mitzvah of giving challah. It speaks about many different things. So even though a lot of the parsha is devoted to the story of the spies, and because of that it's called Shlach, send, because the spies were sent to Eretz Yisroel, still in all, that must have a meaning that connects with every part of the parsha. Tzarich lahav nekuda saying the Shlach l'cha nashim hareu rak sipur kodesh bnei Yisrael b'yosim b'midbar v'loi mitzvah shenistavinu l'kaima v'kiyotz v'zeh. It's not a particular mitzvah over here. It's just a story. That's what the beginning of Shlach is about. The parsha shebesidra zuha bois lachri siparam raglim yeshbam mitzvos ladoides. When you talk about the next parshas, that within this Sedra, the next sections that deal with things, it talks about mitzvahs that go on all the time, like challah, like we said, like tzitzis. Magam ha-parsha shebesim ha-sedra she-mitzvah tzitzis. Tzitzis have something unique. He mitzvah klolis ha-mevil is kol ha-taryag mitzvahs k'may shekosam uriisam oisay zachartem es kol mitzvahs Hashem. By looking at the tzitzis, we remind ourselves of all the mitzvahs. So tzitzis is not just any mitzvah, but it's something that symbolizes all the mitzvahs of the Torah. Whereas Shalach is a story, it's an event. It's not a mitzvah. Ve'eich yitachem shein de shlach l'chan noshim. She'ein el l'sipur dvorim yechoshuv yoyser me'amitzvah shebesedra koilo mitzvahs tzitzis ha'kelelos es kol ha'taryag mitzvahs va'ad shebeshem ze shlach mispatas ha'nekuda yikri shel kol ha'sedra. How can shlach be the main point of the Sedra? The word shlach, sending the spies, should be so much more important than any other mitzvahs in the whole parsha, especially more important than the mitzvah of tzitzis that encapsulates and indicates all the mitzvahs of the Torah. V'afshe pashas nekras ha-sedra b'shem shlach. L'fisher teva zu ba b'tchilos ha-sedra v'chol ha-sedra nekras al shem ha-schalosam hari afri ha-schalosam yisibas Hashem mikol mokem mekivim shezel Shem al pitoira hari Hashem moed al toichen kol ha-sedra kanal. The Rebbe says, we know that the names of parshas are usually has to do with the first unique word at the beginning of the Sedra. Of course, it says, Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe Leimer, that says in many Sedras, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying so. But the first one, that's like a unique part of the story, that will be the first word of the parsha. But still in all, even if we're saying the reason why this is the name, A name is something according to Torah that indicates the content of something. The Alter Rebbe in Sharichot V'Emunah and Tanya speaks about how the name of every item, of every creation, is its channel through which it gets its life force from Hashem. If that's so, when we're talking about a physical matter, how much more so when we're talking about a name in Torah? So regardless of how we came up with the name Shlach for this parsha, because it was one of the first words in the Sedra. But after all, it's the name of the parsha. And being that's the name, that shows that that is the meaning and the content of the whole thing. So the question is, how can the word Shlach contain in it and have any connection with the mitzvahs of the parsha, like tzitzis and so on? Base. We need to understand what was the actual sin. In other words, the famous question, what were they thinking? The pashtus chotu b'zeh sheba'u v'sipru ki aza am hayoshev ba'aretz v'harim b'tzuras gedolos ma'od v'gam yelidei anak arinu sham. They sinned because they related that the nation is strong, that's settled over there, and the cities are fortified, they're very big, very strong fortifications, and also they were giants over there. Their mission was to determine and to find out, is it a strong people in the land? Are the cities open encampments? Or are they fortified cities? This was the mission that they were meant to do. They brought back the information. What was the problem? So they said they were strong. They were asked to find out, are they strong? They said they're strong. They fulfilled their mission that they were supposed to scout out the land. Moshe Rabeinu sholcham leivada be'eza derech va'oifen kal yoser lichbesh Eretz Yisroel ube'eza makim kedai yoser lahaskal akibish b'derech hateva. What was the purpose of Moshe sending these scouts, these spies? Because he wanted to find in nature, by natural means, what is the best way to enter Eretz Yisroel for conquering, what roads to take, etc. I remember when I was in the Soviet Union, and I heard this from others also, you couldn't buy a map. You could not, like you go to a gas station in the old days before Google, 20 years ago, you had to get somewhere, you didn't know directions. You went into the gas station, or you went for your trip to AAA, and you picked up a map. There's no such thing in Russia as going into the store and picking up a map. They're paranoid that if an invading army comes in, they're going to have maps to be able to know where to go. Even an inner city map, a map inside, no such thing. There's also no telephone books, by the way. It's also no telephone. You had to, if you didn't know the number of who you had to call, you couldn't call them. This is part of their paranoia. Anyway, so Moshe Rabeinu wanted to know, using the rules of nature, even though the conquest of Eretz Yisroel was going to be miraculous and supernatural, but he wanted to follow the rules of nature by how to conquer a land. And for the rules of nature, you need to scout out, and you say, well, this road is passable, this road can hold a big army, this road is stopped by a river. These are things that you want to find out before you go and conquer a place. Why did he have to do so? If it was going to be miraculous anyway, he'll just rely on Hashem, it'll be miraculous, that's all. Since Hashem doesn't make miracles for no reason, we need to put an effort in everything. Top of the next page. So even if eventually there will be a miracle, and eventually we will need miracles to conquer Eretz Yisroel, but as much as possible it's incumbent upon us to minimize the amount of miracles or the details of the miracles. We have to do whatever we can in a natural way. That's why he sent the spies to be able to see what's the best way to conquer and enter Eretz Yisroel. That was no doubt in his mind. Regardless of whatever information they find out, he knew that conquering Eretz Yisroel they would definitely accomplish. Why is it? Because Ki Kein Tziva Hashem. Since Hashem commanded it, so there's no way that Hashem would command for something that's impossible, as we'll explain as we go on. This is what I mentioned before. They didn't just share the information. They didn't just collect the intelligence and bring it to their commander-in-chief, but rather they also analyzed and they brought in their own commentary. We can't do it because they're too strong. They came to the conclusion that they wouldn't be able to conquer it because that's what their mind said. But they shared their conclusion. Not only that, they shared it in public. They didn't just call over Moshe Rabeinu.
They didn't just share within their own camp.
Exactly. They could have. If they were really concerned, they could have called over Moshe Rabeinu. This doesn't make it. What are we going to do over here? But they went over there and made a public statement, called a press conference in front of the whole Eidah, and they said, 12 guys get up and said, this is, and actually 10 out of the 12 guys got up and said, we can't do this. This is impossible. So, Al Pisa movement, Shayra Mesipar Amaraglim, he Shayeches Lachol HaTorah Mitzvos. Now we will understand why the story of the Maraglim Shlach is something that matters for everything, even the mitzvahs, because it's a general lesson in the performance of mitzvahs. Yisoid ikri bekim kol ha-mitzvahs hi ha-yediyah shemekivim sha-mitzvahs hem tzivuya HaKadosh Baruch Hu borur ha-dover she'efshel l'kaimam ki ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mevakesh al lefi koicham. Something that Hashem commands, it's a given. It's taken for granted that we are able to do so, because Hashem does not ask of us only that which is in our capabilities. And the Rebbe says it's a very logical conclusion to say that Hashem would only ask of us what we're capable of doing. Any rational human being, we're not talking about a person that's irrational, even a rational person, he'll never ask of someone to do something that's an impossibility. Surely, let's say, if I built a computer, I wouldn't ask of the computer to do things that the computer isn't capable of doing. If I had made let's say, a living robot, I wouldn't ask it to do something that I know I didn't build into the system to be able to do. When a person asks of someone else, if he's thinking rationally, and he's not mistaken, which that's a possibility, a human being can be mistaken, he will not ask something that the other person or the thing that he knows of its capabilities can't do. He says parenthetically, a human being, after all, it's possible for him to make a mistake. So I estimate, and I thought that the car can make it up to 120 miles an hour and only can go 100 miles an hour. And I'm pressing the accelerator and it's not reaching there. So you could say, I'm asking too much of it because I miscalculated. A human being can miscalculate. But by Hashem, that He cannot miscalculate, so for sure, if He asks something of us, it's something that we could do. He is pure goodness. And He's pure justice, meaning He does only things that are right and correct. He will not ask of a human being that He made to do something that He did not give him the capabilities and the power to be able to do it. And Hashem can't make mistakes either. So He's not going to make a mistake and think, I thought He could do it, but really He can't do it. There's no such possibility by Hashem. Yet, despite that, Hashem doesn't ask of us what it's impossible for us to do. Also, when it comes to fulfilling a mitzvah, we don't rely on a miracle. It says, he points out to Gemara and Pesachim, that in certain cases where a person needs to perform a mitzvah, just like checking for chametz on Pesach, but it's going to involve a certain amount of danger, because his wall, it's a case where he has a wall that he shares with a non-Jew, and if you go and he has a hole in the wall, if he goes over there with the candle inside the hole of the wall, the non-Jew might think that he's doing some type of magic, casting a magic spell on him, and maybe might want to kill the Jew because of it. So then we say, even though shluchim mitzvah ein nizakin, it says that people that perform a mitzvahs are not harmed, but you're not supposed to place yourself in a place sakana. And the same thing, and that's why we don't rely on a miracle. We don't say, well, I'm doing Hashem's mitzvah, I should rely on a miracle. We don't do it that way. Va'adrab, the Rebbe goes even further. Not just don't we not rely on a miracle, but we avoid miracles when it comes to mitzvahs. Inyan ikri b'mitzvahs hu l'kaima b'derech hateva. Why is that necessary to do it in a natural way, not in a supernatural way? Since we're supposed to make our home for Hashem down here below, we have to use the rules of nature because we're trying to uplift nature itself. If we break the rules of nature, if we're using miracles, so then we're not uplifting nature. So that the nature itself should become a home for Hashem. This is the famous thing that Rebbe always brings down about the story with Alter Rebbe, that he was crossing the Neva when he was being taken for interrogation with a boat. As we know, Leningrad has a lot of canals, and he had to cross it with a boat to get from his prison to his interrogation and back. And when he was crossing the river one night, it was time to make Kiddush Levana. But you can't make Kiddush Levana, or you couldn't stand while the boat was in motion. So he asked the captain of the boat, or the little, whatever small craft that he was being taken in, to stop the boat so he should be able to make the Beracha. Of course, a prisoner is asking the captain to stop the boat. He's not going to listen to him. So he refused. And all of a sudden the boat got stuck and he couldn't move. So when the captain saw that we're not talking about an ordinary person, we're talking about a holy person that can make a boat stop, or that Hashem makes the boat stop for him, so he agreed that that he will stop for the Alter Rebbe. In other words, he would be able to start the boat again, and then he would stop for the Alter Rebbe, so the Alter Rebbe should be able to make Kiddush Levana. And the Rebbe always speaks about this idea, why was it necessary for the Alter Rebbe to wait for the boat to be stopped manually by the captain after this miracle occurred, that it stopped on its own? Because we're not supposed to do a mitzvah based on miracles, because the purpose of a mitzvah, like he says over here, is to transform the physicality of this world, the natural state of this world. If you perform a mitzvah via a miracle, so then you haven't transformed this world. So therefore the Alter Rebbe asked the captain afterwards to stop it manually, so he should be able to fulfill the mitzvah based on the world. The Rebbe concludes right before Daled, that's why Moshe Rabeinu used natural means. He sent them to scout out the land. Hashem commanded them a mitzvah. What was the mitzvah that Hashem had for the Jewish people? To go up to Eretz Yisroel. Now we want to try to do this as naturally as possible. We wanted to use the rules of nature as much as possible, so Moshe Rabeinu had to send scouts to determine what roads to use, what paths to use to be able to get in. So now the Rebbe is going to say, this is something that matters for all the mitzvahs, and that's why Shlach is the name of the entire parsha. This is necessary in all mitzvahs. Entering Eretz Yisroel is a general encompassing thing that has to do with all the mitzvahs. The explanation is Tachton and Milos Eretz Yisroel mevur b'kasav Eretz Goymer Eini Hashem Elokecha Bo Mereish Hashana v'Achris Shana. Hainu sheba hashgacha al yoyne hi ba'ofen pnimi v'golo yoismer b'shar haratzos. Hashem's divine providence is stronger and direct and more internalized in Eretz Yisroel than any other country. So it's a matter of Eretz HaKodesh gam behagashmi sheba'aretz, even in the material part of the land. V'inyaneha nirgish alakus yisbarach lalkus yisbarach begilu yoyser. Hashem's presence, His godliness is more permeated, more felt. And this idea that Eretz Yisroel is somewhere that has godliness more felt is really what every mitzvah is about. Top of page 36. I think it's 36.
No.
Oh, it's a different print than what I have. Al Pisa, move on. Cham shachas kedusha geluya hainu alakus be'inim v'davar gashmi hariza bedugmas knisas hadavar v'apula v'adam apoyel Eretz Yisroel. When I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm bringing godliness into a physical thing. When I'm entering Eretz Yisroel, I'm also trying to bring godliness into Eretz Yisroel. So it's a matter shakim kol mitzvah bedugmas knisol Eretz Yisroel kikiyam ha-mitzvah sukanal hamshachas alakus binyanim agashmim sheyasu aydei dirlo yizbarech. So entering Eretz Yisroel, even though it's just a story, is something that encompasses the entire spectrum of fulfilling mitzvahs, because every mitzvah is represented by the entry to Eretz Yisroel. It's about transforming the physical into a home for Hashem. So one lesson is about this idea that you need to know that when Hashem asks us of something, we can do it. That's one lesson that we learn from this parsha. It's negeh for all the mitzvahs of the Torah. And that's why the name of the parsha is Shlach, even though it talks about other mitzvahs. Hey, another lesson is that everything needs, what's it called? Like mindfulness. Everything, it's a very in word these days. Mindfulness. You don't just do things. You need to have a consciousness and awareness of what you're doing. When we grow up doing Torah mitzvahs our entire life, we end up doing things, automatic, and we don't think about it. It's like, it's so natural to us. Koydem kol mitzvah la'adam lizboinen b'toichna mitzvah shayim oimid l'kayim. Before every mitzvah, I need to spend time thinking about the mitzvah. Not only about what's the meaning of this individual mitzvah. For example, by tefillin, I need to keep in mind that I'm making my mind and my heart subservient to Hashem. We also have to think about the general common denominator in all the mitzvahs. So every mitzvah I am both becoming holy and I am making things holy. And every mitzvah I have the idea from mitzvah from the word tzavta, meaning togetherness, that I'm making a union and I'm joining with Hashem. Now, the Beracha, when do we recite the Beracha? Before the mitzvah, because we have to have this mindfulness before we perform the mitzvah. Beracha zumevarchem lifnei kiyum ha-mitzvah, oiver l'asiyasan is the expression of Chazal before the mitzvah is called oiver l'asiyasan. Lahoir is to indicate shalifnei asiyas ha-mitzvah la'adam li'izboinen b'toichem v'kavana klolish shal kol ha-mitzvahs. That's why we have the brachas on mitzvahs. It's very interesting because we understand why we have brachas on other things. Before we eat, we make a bracha. Why? Because we want to be thankful. We want to show Hashem that we appreciate the food that He gave us. But what are we making a bracha for a mitzvah for? The bracha on the mitzvah is to make us aware of what we're doing. To take a moment to think and say, I'm doing something over here. I'm joining with Hashem over here. I'm bringing down Hashem into this world. The time of the bracha of a mitzvah is to take a pause. Take a break, think for a moment. What am I about to do with this mitzvah?
Was it your sure about the privilege?
The privilege of doing mitzvahs?
Yeah.
I don't remember. It sounds a little bit familiar. So I don't remember for sure. And he says, not only before doing a mitzvah, as I said, Hashem gave us His Torah, the way He owns the Torah, the way it's His creation. We conclude in present tense that Hashem is constantly giving us the Torah. Every day, the Torah is new to us. Yet, despite the fact, not despite the fact, but this is a person needs to be conscious and aware of this every single time before he studies Torah. That's what it means. You should scout out the land of Canaan. What's the scouting out? Pay attention. Be mindful. Think about it. Mitzvahs and entering Eretz Yisroel, we said, are the same thing. A person needs to think before entering Eretz Yisroel, meaning before fulfilling a mitzvah and before studying Torah, he has to be lasur es Eretz Canaan. You need to look at it. You need to scout it out. You need to pay attention to it. That the meaning of shlach, and who is the one that sends us? Moshe Rabeinu. Moshe Rabeinu al v'shalom sheb'chol nefesh v'nefesh b'beis Yisrael. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that in every single Jew there's a miniature part of Moshe Rabeinu, which is his point of awe and connection with Hashem. So the Moshe within each and every Jew, he is about sending to see and to be conscious and to be aware of what I'm doing. All the parshas of the Sedra, that which talks about tzitzis and it talks about the mitzvah of challah, all of these things are all part of shlach. At the beginning of the Sedra it says shlach. Why is it at the beginning of the Sedra? Because what we learn from this is a foundational part of mitzvah. It's an introduction to all the mitzvahs. So before we talk about other mitzvahs, we need to know this idea that Hashem doesn't ask of us something that's not impossible. We need to have the mindfulness to be aware of what we're doing beforehand. So now, the Rebbe asks the other way. We know, Rashi says at the beginning of the Sedra, that it says a very interesting expression. It says, Shlach lecha anoshim v'yasuras eretz Canaan. Send for you men, and they will scout out the land of Canaan. Why does it say send for you, lecha? Shlach anoshim, send men, and they will scout out Eretz Canaan. So Hashem told Moshe Rabeinu, I'm giving it to you. You decide if you want. Moshe Rabeinu says in Chumash Devarim that the Jewish people asked him for it, and he was unsure. So he asked Hashem. So Hashem says, I'm putting the ball in your court. You decide. It's up to you to decide if you should send. So the Rebbe is going to ask a very simple question. Based on what we just now explained, it's such basic ideas over here. It's so crucial, it's so vital to know that Hashem doesn't ask of us what we can't do. And also to have the mindfulness before the mitzvah, to be aware of what we're doing in the mitzvah. Why didn't Hashem just tell him, yes, for sure, do this. It's a very good thing. Why did he say, if you want, you could do it? It seemed to be a very important thing. Vav. Yes, by Hairois, Ikriyos, V'Yisoidiyos, Hare Lechurahu Inyan Hechrechi. It's a vital and crucial part of everything. It's a necessary part. I'm not telling you to do anything about this. If you want, you could send them a raglim. If you don't want, it's up to you. You can decide. We just now said that these are very important lessons in our service of Hashem. Hashem should have said, definitely do this. You definitely want to teach them that they should be mindful before a mitzvah. You definitely want to teach them that it's possible, that Hashem is not going to ask of us something it's not possible. So why did he give him a choice? The Medrash is a very famous Medrash that says that the purpose of Matan Torah is the union of above and below, that those below should rise up to above. And that's the purpose of mitzvahs in the physical, to draw down the spiritual in the world so the world can become elevated. Based on this, the Rebbe is going to say is why Moshe Rabeinu's prerogative was allowed over here. Why he had the choice of deciding. That's what it means. It's coming from the Tachtonim. It's coming from the person down here below. It's the transformation of below when the choice is left to the below. The creator is the one, the giver, and the created being, the creation, is the receiver. A created being, it has nothing of its own. It's entirely made by Hashem. Since the entire reason for the giving of the Torah is that those down here below should ascend to above, Hashem is the Mashpia, we are the Mekabel. Now we have to become Mashpia also. We have to be the givers as well. How can we be a giver? If everything we have is we receive from Hashem, how can we be a Mashpia? How can we be a giver? The Chazal say that when a person observes Shabbos, and it's also I think brought down concerning other mitzvahs, so then he becomes a partner to Hashem in the creation. What does that mean? Hashem is not the only creator. A human being, a created being, becomes a creator. He is a giver in the creation. That there was a time when the Chachamim said, Hashem, mix out of our arguments, because Torah lo b'shamayim hi, and Hashem was afterwards asked, what does he think about this type of being told to mix out? So he said, they've been victorious over me, they've defeated me. In other words, Hashem appreciates when we tell him what to do. That's true partners. True partners, sometimes this one says, and his opinion holds sway, and sometimes this partner says, and his opinion holds sway. And therefore Yidden add an increase and are creative in Torah. So we add to the Torah. So many things that the Chachamim came along and said what we should do. Because Hashem empowered us, empowered the Jewish people to add and increase and make the Torah grow. Now we can understand why Hashem told Moshe Rabeinu, I want to hear it from you, what your take on this is. Because Hashem wanted Moshe Rabeinu to be the Mashpia, and he wanted to teach us this lesson, how we have to be creative. And we have to think of ways to bring more divinity into this world, even if it's things we didn't see by our parents or our grandparents, or it doesn't say in Shulchan Aruch. We have to come up with new ideas. According to this, we can understand why this wasn't a command from Hashem. Though they are necessary, the last page, when a person fulfills Hashem's wishes, he becomes elevated. But he doesn't become yet a creator. He doesn't become yet a Mashpia. He doesn't yet become a giver and then someone that's adding into the Torah. Shari soif ein el mekayim tzivui shezogam nesinus koyach ma'aboidei. After all said and done, all he's doing is he's doing what he's told. Nothing more. So it's a marriage shadayin hu miktsasei mekabel ma'aboidei, still to a certain degree on the receiving end. He is not creative. He is just accepting and just receiving. And the point is that we as receivers should also become contributors and givers. Mashpia so then he becomes elevated to become a Mashpia, because he's doing it out of his own mind and out of his own will. This is what the Rebbe actually constantly told us. He constantly encouraged us to be creative in spreading Yiddishkeit. He didn't just want do it the old-fashioned way. If you can spread Yiddishkeit through the internet, use the internet to spread Yiddishkeit. If you have other type of innovative ways, as long as it fits within the parameters and the limitations of Shulchan Aruch, go for it. Now it's understood even deeper. Why did the story of the sending the spies precede all the other mitzvahs in our parsha? Not just the lessons of shlach, like we said before, that Hashem doesn't ask of us what we cannot do, and the lesson that we have to be mindful. Not only does that matter for the entire fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs, also the manner that these lessons are derived. Torah mitzvahs teaches us the ultimate purpose of the Torah mitzvahs, Tachton, that those below, they should become above. They should become creative. They should become creators and add to the Torah mitzvahs as well.